Afternoon? Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Um, I want to invite the counselor up here as well. We are thankful to be here with you all. I'm going to switch it up a little and make sure that we're communicating with all of our residents. And so, en español primero. En cada una de las tres calles que nos rodean hemos instalado topes para reducir el exceso de velocidad, reducir las colisiones y hacer que estas calles residenciales sean más seguras para los niños y las familias, para nuestros residentes de mayor edad y los residentes con discapacidades y para todos los que utilizan estas calles, sean peatones, ciclistas o conductores. Y estamos planeando ampliar lo que hemos hecho aquí a las calles residenciales de barrios de toda nuestra ciudad como parte de nuestra iniciativa de aumento de la seguridad. Nuestro equipo de calles ha desarrollado un plan para instalar topes a través de un nuevo enfoque basado en zonas. A veces, cuando instalamos topes en una calle solamente, los conductores encuentran una calle paralela y circulan a toda velocidad por ella. Si adoptamos un enfoque zonal más global, podemos bajar el riesgo que el exceso de velocidad representa para la seguridad de todos nuestros residentes. Nos hemos comprometido a instalar topes en 10 zonas al año y ya hemos identificado las zonas en las que nos concentraremos en los próximos 3 años. También estamos muy contentos de anunciar nuestro trabajo para rediseñar nuestras intersecciones y calles principales. Cada año rediseñaremos al menos 25 intersecciones de Boston para mejorar la visibilidad, combatir el exceso de velocidad y crear cruces más seguros. Durante los últimos 6 meses, nuestro Departamento de Transporte también ha trabajado duro para actualizar nuestras directivas sobre señales de tráfico. Las nuevas directivas aumentarán la seguridad de los peatones y reducirán el riesgo de colisiones en los cruces, aclarando a los conductores cuándo está permitido y es seguro dar vuelta y dando a los peatones más tiempo para cruzar antes de que los semáforos de una calle paralela se pongan en verde. Nuestras calles deben ser una fuente de conexión, no una amenaza a nuestra seguridad. Estamos muy contentos de poder tomar pasos hacia esta meta con las iniciativas que hemos anunciado hoy. Okay, so thank you so much to all of our partners for being here. You will hear from some of the key leaders on the city administration and in community and in our community advocacy who have been fighting for safe streets for a very long time. So I want to thank our Chief of Streets, Yasha Franklin Hodge, our partners in the nonprofit and community sectors, Fatima Ali Salam, Chair of the Greater Mattapan Neighborhood Council, Brendan Kearney, Deputy Director of Advocacy for Walk Massachusetts, and we're also joined here by our Chief of Community Engagement, Chief Brianna Malore, community leaders, Ms. Barbara Critchlow, Kenya Beeman, many others who have built and lead these communities, as well as my colleagues in elected office, who you'll hear from shortly as well, City Councilor Brian Worrell and State Representative Russell Holmes. On each of the 3 streets around us, Thetford Ave, Stanton Street, Evans Street, we've installed speed humps to discourage speeding, reduce crashes, and make these residential streets safer for children and families, for our older residents and residents with disabilities, and for everyone using these roads, whether you're a pedestrian, a cyclist, or driving. And we're planning to scale what we've done here to residential streets across our neighborhoods as part of Boston's Safety Surge initiative. Our streets team has developed a plan to roll out speed humps through a new zone-based approach with neighborhood speed humps. In the past, when there have been speed humps kind of sparingly installed, they've been on just one street at a time with a process for community members and residents to petition and talk about that one street. But then what we find is that drivers will often just go to the next street over or a parallel one, and that just pushes the speeding cars somewhere else. So we really want to have a comprehensive approach where we're looking zone by zone within our neighborhoods so that we mitigate the safety risk that speeding poses to all our residents rather than just shifting it to a different street. I have spent a lot of time in all of our neighborhoods and parks, and in particular in this area and in surrounding areas, knocked on a whole lot of doors. And what I hear from residents is that previously, when they first moved into their homes and wanted that front yard to be a place where their kids could play and they could raise a family, or they anticipated being able to age in place and be able to get around walking to what they needed to get to, that as more and more speeding cars are cutting through our residential side streets, even front yards on a previously quiet neighborhood residential street are now quite scary for parents, and in many cases kids are no longer able to play outside in the front yard. We've had situations in Boston even in recent weeks where residents sitting on their porch had cars come up and over the curb because of speeding, and we need to see this addressed across the entire city. We are committed to installing speed humps across 10 zones a year, and we've already identified the zones that will be targeted over the next 3 years. Because the health, safety, and well-being of our communities is our top priority, we'll be prioritizing zones based on crash history and resident demographics, because we know that, according to the numbers, our residents of color experience more traffic-related fatalities. And that's just one of the ways we're going to improve street safety across the city. Along with the plan to roll out speed humps in residential areas, we're also announcing work to redesign intersections and major roadways. Moving forward, each year, Boston will redesign at least 25 intersections across the city to improve visibility, address unsafe speeding, and create safer crossings. For the past 6 months, our transportation department has also been hard at work updating our traffic signal guidelines. This will make sure that pedestrian safety is prioritized. It'll reduce the risk of turning collisions for making it clearer for drivers when a turn is allowed and safe, and giving pedestrians more time to cross before the lights along a parallel street turn green and the cars come this way. Along with these safety surge initiatives, we're working to improve safety along major corridors, from Cummins Highway in Mattapan, where we've already heard loud and clear community priorities around safety, to Tremont Street in the South End, where construction's already underway. We've also launched the public process to improve safety along Blue Hill Ave, and will soon begin engaging the West Roxbury community on Center Street. We are looking to having safer streets all across Boston, not just here around one park, as beautiful and as treasured a space as it is, but every single neighborhood. We want to make sure our streets are safer for drivers, for cyclists, for pedestrians, and everyone who needs to get around. Our streets should be a source of connection, not a threat to our safety. And we want to make sure that we're not rationing that safety in limited areas across the city following when major incidents and injuries happen. But we want to be proactive, preventative, and really work with communities at a much broader scale and much more accelerated pace to make this happen. So I want to thank all of our residents across each and every neighborhood for your advocacy, and looking forward to continuing that with the specific changes that we'll be making in the weeks to come. So next up, I'm going to invite up Chief Yasha Franklin Hodge.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm Yasha Franklin Hodge, Chief of Streets for the City of Boston, and I'm grateful to have the chance to be here today to talk about street safety. More than 3,000 times per year, Boston EMS and the Boston Police Department respond to injury crashes on our streets. And while many of these injuries are minor, hundreds of people find that their lives are altered profoundly in some cases, or in some cases even ended as a result of a traffic crash. And even in those times when people are physically okay, traffic crashes leave mental scars on the people involved and within our communities. It's the senior citizen who no longer feels safe crossing the busy street in their neighborhood, or the father I talked to who said, you know, every time I walk down my block with my kids, I remember the day we walked out of our house and there was a car overturned on that sidewalk right here. It's the business owner who had to sweep up the glass and the merchandise after a car came through the front of the place of business where they go and work every single day. And I hear from people in every neighborhood about these experiences and these fears. People tell me about the cars speeding past the sidewalks where they walk and their kids play. You know, they talk about the near misses at an intersection where just a few feet was the difference between something terrifying and something far, far worse. And I hear the frustration in the voice of people who tell me that they are tired. They're tired of worrying about their kids' bike ride to school or their parents' trip to the corner store. And I see the notifications from the Boston Police Department. We got one this morning, and they often read something like today's, which said, pedestrian struck by motor vehicle, fatal reconstruction team notified. We are here today to talk about a program to do more. More to slow down speeding drivers, more to make crosswalks safer, more to make everyone, whether they're a driver, a pedestrian, or a person on a bike, safe when they use our major intersections. There are 3 key strategies in this program. As the mayor talked about, we'll be implementing zones of simple speed humps in eligible neighborhood streets. We will retrofit or redesign intersections and major roadways with safety features. And we're implementing a new set of guidelines for the city's traffic signals. To talk about first the speed humps, in the past, as the mayor noted, the city has built speed humps kind of very selectively or only as part of a very targeted safety intervention. We're releasing a new speed hump policy and design directive that designates speed humps as part of our standard street design. Whenever it's technically appropriate to install them, we will make the effort to do so. And we've established guidelines on how they can be placed, how far apart, on what types of streets, and how they should be actually physically constructed. And by creating this design standard, we will make the implementation process quicker and therefore be able to deliver more speed humps to more streets in the city. You'll be able to see a map on boston.gov to look up any street to determine if it's eligible for speed humps, and if so, when they may be coming. We've scheduled out the construction of 10 zones per year, and we'll update the map with more zones as each construction phase is determined. These zones are selected using risk-based prioritization that targets areas with a history of crashes and larger numbers of people at the highest risk of death or injury. Almost half of our nearly 800 miles of city streets are eligible for speed humps. And while it will take years to build out every street, we believe that these simple tools will help curb excess speeds, support a culture of safer driving, and help Bostonians feel confident, comfortable, and safe, especially when walking and biking in their own neighborhoods. Intersections are where the majority of crashes occur in Boston. So each year, we will design safer intersections using street safety tools that will allow for better sight lines, slower speeds, clear crossings, and defined spaces for all. We will prioritize 25 to 30 non-signalized intersections based on safety history, demographics, including higher numbers of children, older adults, and people with disabilities, community concerns, and whether there are parks, schools, or community centers nearby. We want intersections that not only help people on foot or on bike feel safe, but also reduce stress and risk for drivers by improving visibility, better separating different road users, and simplifying confusing intersections. We've updated our guidelines for traffic signals to make signalized intersections safer for people walking, biking, and driving. The new guidelines look at every aspect of how our signals are timed to prioritize safety while still maintaining a smooth flow of vehicles. Traffic signals are complex, and I'll spare everyone a sort of treatise on signal engineering, but here are a few of the changes that people are likely to notice. A leading pedestrian interval, which allows walkers to get a head start by giving people a walk sign a few seconds before drivers get a green light. This creates more visibility for pedestrians and reduces conflicts between people walking and turning drivers. Boston is joining many other jurisdictions in the region and around the country by prohibiting right turns on red in more high-risk locations. Right turn crashes often result from drivers looking left to find an opportunity to turn instead of looking right at the crosswalk that they will be turning into. The new guidelines identify criteria for use of no turn on red, including downtown and neighborhood business districts and near schools, senior centers, parks, libraries, mass transit stations, and hospitals. Additional use of what we call auto recall, which gives pedestrians a walk sign without having to push a button, also helps improve safety and convenience for people on foot. And there are many other more technical changes, from left turns and crossing times and every aspect of these guidelines, which we believe will help keep people safe. We plan to update 50 intersections a year using these new guidelines, and we'll implement them as part of other major projects. This safety surge complements the many corridor projects underway, as the mayor listed some of them: Tremont Street in the South End, Center Street in West Roxbury, Blue Hill Ave and Cummins Highway in Mattapan. Together, these projects can positively transform both major arteries and our neighborhood streets. Mayor Wu has put more than $12 million in new funding in her FY24 budget to support the Safety Surge program and related projects. And I want to thank the mayor for her support. I also want to thank the people of the Boston Transportation Department and the Public Works Department who do this work with urgency and the urgency and the dedication that it deserves, and the advocates and the residents who continue to push us to do more. The streets we build must reflect our belief that everyone, regardless of their age or ability, should have the freedom to travel safely and without fear. The City of Boston is putting that idea into action in asphalt and concrete, in paint and flex posts and signs and signals, as we work towards a future where no family ever has to experience tragedy or trauma on our streets. Thank you very much.
So I'll just announce a speaking order so I don't have to keep coming up. Next, you'll hear from Fatima Ali Salam of the Greater Mattapan Neighborhood Council, then Brendan Kearney of WALK, Massachusetts, then Councilor Worrell and Rep. Holmes.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Fatima Ali Salam. I'm the chair for the Greater Mattapan Neighborhood Council. I'd like to thank Mayor Wu and her administration for forward thinking and providing safe streets for all of our neighborhoods. Mattapan is one of the neighborhoods that unfortunately holds a high number of crashes. We also have one of the highest numbers of teens and young people in our neighborhoods, as well as seniors. For everyone, in order to be safe, we're very thankful that immediately, instead of going through the previous Slow Streets program, we're able to do a more comprehensive approach. And we thank the administration for its efforts. Thank you.
Hi, Brendan Kearney, Deputy Director, WALK, Massachusetts. Unsafe road design is creating fatal consequences for communities across the Commonwealth. In 2022, 435 people lost their lives in traffic crashes, including 101 pedestrians. The sharp rise in fatal crashes is extremely troubling, but we're grateful that Mayor Wu and the Transportation Department are responding today with urgency. In the City of Boston, speed humps were first introduced as a tool in the Neighborhood Slow Streets pilot program, and they've been so popular, they're going to be a proactive part of design when an eligible street is being redone. That is huge, like not having to go through multiple public meetings for just a few speed humps. We're very grateful that's happening. Boston's leading on making streets safer for everyone, and we hope other communities and state agencies follow this example. MassDOT created their Strategic Highway Safety Plan earlier at the end of December. We're hopeful they soon issue an action plan to implement it, because many streets in communities, including Boston, are controlled by MassDOT as well. And the last thing I'll say is the reason speed humps are so important is in a 20-mile-per-hour crash, if a crash happened, there's a 90% chance that person will survive. So this is really about making it safer for everyone on the streets of Boston. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. District 4 Boston City Councilor Brian Worrell. And today's a great day. Every day that I go to a constituent meeting or a civic association meeting or knocking on doors or answering emails, we hear about the need for speed bumps and street safety here in the city of Boston. And I just want to thank Chief Franklin Hodge, the whole BTD staff, and Mayor Wu for being intentional and prioritizing data, which means prioritizing our communities, our black and brown communities, when it comes to street safety here in the city of Boston, and being very proactive on creating an approach that is clear and transparent, and that's not a cumbersome approach on an application process. So this is a lot more efficient way on rolling out speed humps, and I think our community is going to be excited to hear about this great news. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Russell Holmes. I have the honor of representing parts of Mattapan, Dorchester, Hyde Park, and Rosendale at the State House. I come to say the same. I come to say thank you, Mayor, thank you, Chief, thank you to the entire team, because the old Slow Street program literally used to pit one community against the next. It literally used to say, hey, prove how horrible your streets are, and let's prove that this is more horrible than this one. And then, okay, you win. Your streets have more crashes, more people dying, Okay, so we're going to give you a speed hump. And that process was one that is just unfortunate, that you literally had to go and just prove that you're the worst. And what was great about it, though, at least you could see what the process was. It was open, it was transparent. You can see, hey, here's why we made these choices. And so what was also clear was the political heft that came with it. Like, it was important in the formal process for literally, it would be how many state reps, how many senators, how many city councilors were literally a part of the recommendation to make that happen, and that was part of the weight. That's an inappropriate way to make these choices. And so I was talking to Chief Hodge a moment ago. It was just like when we decided about paving streets. We literally paved streets in the past for many, many years by how many people made phone calls, not by what the worst streets were in the city, but literally by how active people were politically. And so this new process simply says, look, we're going to do what we did with the streets. We're going to measure streets. We're going to grade the streets. We're going to figure out what the worst streets are in the city, and we're going to fix them. We're going to now have zones, and very much to what the mayor said, it is right. You think about what we did on Milton, folks just move to the next street, and then they just start to fly down the next street. For whatever reason, no one wants to slow down in this city. It just seems like no one will slow down no matter what we do. And so when I was chair of Go Boston 2030, I would say to Kenya and to Fatima and others, the most important is Barbara. She knows. The most important streets to us were what I call ABC, American Legion, Blue Avenue, Cummings Highway. Slow those streets down. Now the question comes when we actually now come and slow them down, people still want to race. They still want to race down American Legion, and they say, why you put up all these flex posts? So you can stop killing yourself. That's why we're putting up these flex posts. And so we're hoping that this new process now is much more transparent, one that seems much more fair, and certainly does not pit one neighborhood against the other. Thanks so much.
Okay, any questions for anyone up here on the Safety Surge initiative? Yep.
I know you're dealing with so many dynamics on so many different streets. One area that we've heard there might be some concern is about the new bike lane going in on Berkeley, right in the center of Back Bay, going over to Esplanade. Is that different, slightly same family topic, slightly different? Is that something you guys have thought about? Is there any concern about putting a bike lane right there?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. So, we do have, in addition to our safety programs, we have programs to promote transit and cycling, safe cycling within the city. And I think the lane you're referring to is part of the announcement that the mayor and the team made last year about an additional 9.4 miles of bike lane to be constructed this year. The focus of that program is about creating a safe, connected network of cycle routes. When we talk to people who bike, and even more importantly, people who want to bike but don't, what we hear every time is that it's the most dangerous part of their trip, the scariest part of their trip, that's what they remember. And that's the thing that often is the gating factor for them making a trip on a bike or getting in their car and adding to the already significant traffic congestion. So we, as part of this 9.4 miles, are very focused on closing gaps in our bicycle network and laying the groundwork for future expansions into parts of the city that don't have safe cycle infrastructure today. The lane on Berkeley Street is an important part of the connection that allows people to traverse from connecting all the way from the south end into the lane that's on Beacon Street and over to the Esplanade, which is sort of something of a highway for people on bikes. And so it complements the existing bike lane on Arlington Street, which only travels in one direction. The Berkeley route takes you in the northbound direction, in the opposite route. We are working with the neighborhood and some of the key institutions along that corridor to make sure that we are designing it in a way that addresses the needs of the neighborhood. We know that that's already a very congested route for drivers, and so we believe we can build that lane without reducing the capacity of the road at all to serve cars that are headed towards Storrow Drive. The design process is ongoing, the community engagement process is ongoing, but I'm confident that we'll have a design for that lane that both makes cycling safer and more appealing and makes sure that the neighbors can get where they need to go.
Chief, just another question for you. So we're talking about the speed humps here and also the traffic lights and things of that nature. When you're talking about kind of those more main thoroughfares like Tremont Street, what's some of the infrastructure that would make people or cars more visible? Or can you just kind of give us an idea of the physical things that are going to change as a part of that second prong of this plan?
Yeah, absolutely. In residential neighborhoods, the changes tend to be fairly small in the sense that you might find a curb extension where the sidewalk extends out into what's now the travel lane to shorten the distance people have to cross. Not far from here, we had a intersection where two streets come in at a funny angle, and we actually added a mini roundabout at that intersection. So instead of this vast expanse of asphalt that cars speed through, we've just organized the movement of traffic. When we get to these corridors, Tremont Street in the South End is a great example of this. It's a street that's had numerous fatalities for pedestrians who were crossing 4 lanes of traffic, often with very poor visibility. And we've completely reimagined the design of that street to turn it into primarily a 2-lane street with much shorter crossing distances, constructed islands at each of the major crossings. All of the side streets now feature raised crosswalks so that people who are walking along the length of Tremont Street are staying at sidewalk level throughout their trip, and cars that are coming onto Tremont or turning off of Tremont have to go over what functions as a speed bump, but it's also the crosswalk. These are the kinds of changes that we make. We couple that always with signal changes. We look at curb regulations to make sure that we have the no parking signs in the right place and that we're using the curb space in a way that supports local businesses and residents. But those are the types of things that we'll typically do as part of a bigger corridor project.
So how people weigh in on this, there's obviously a lot of qualitative data that has to have been taking place a long time before now. So as you roll this out, as this is phased out in these zones, and every year, should people be reaching out to their councilmen? Should they be messaging the mayor? Should they be calling the hotline? What is the best way for them to make sure that the change they see on their block that they want can get to you?
Yeah, we always want to hear when people are experiencing safety concerns in their neighborhood. I mean, that is an invaluable input for us as we plan programs and projects. For our speed humps, as I think the mayor mentioned and I mentioned, the decision about which zones to build when is based on some quantitative analysis, really focusing on risk, who is most at risk for injury, where we have the history of crashes, and rather than as Representative Holmes spoke of, making it a sort of who has the loudest voice, we're going to build those speed humps in the places where they can have the biggest impacts. And so we will be very transparent. We have a map that we're publishing of the upcoming zones and how we're doing that analysis. But it is helpful as we think in particular about what intersections to rebuild, to hear those specific concerns from communities. We're still going to use a lot of data to help us make decisions, but we always want to get that input. Sometimes people experience things or see things that don't show up on the data. We don't want the history of crashes. We don't want injuries and deaths to be the thing that gets us to change our infrastructure. That has to happen proactively. That has to happen in advance of problems, and that is what the community input can be so valuable in helping us do.
While the community is happy and appreciative of everything that the city and the mayor has done as it relates to the speed humps, in this neighborhood where I live, one of the main problems that we're having are people going against the roadway where it says do not enter. Whether it be at this corner here, or whether it be further down the street. What does the city have in plan in order to address that problem? Because the problem of the speed bumps, people flying down, that's part of the problem. But the other part of the problem is the brazenness that we have in this community and in this area where there's a local playground that could potentially end up in a very bad action. What's the city's plan to address that problem?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you telling us about that. Our first path when there are safety issues in the community is always to start with design. How can we design streets that encourage safer behavior? How can we slow down speeds? How can we make turns safer? But at the end of the day, sometimes enforcement is part of the answer to this, right? When there are people who are deliberately choosing to violate something that's very clearly signed, that's there for safety reasons, that is when we have to layer in enforcement on top of the street design work that we do. And that's a partnership between city agencies like mine and the Boston Police Department that do the enforcement work around moving violations. But knowing where that's happening is very helpful because we can work with the local police captain, we can work with the district to help them target enforcement, and maybe it's just stationing a cruiser on a corner for, a week or two to remind people that somebody is paying attention. But we need to bring that into the mix as well.
So have you given any thought on how to slow down the scooters? A lot of them actually go around, or they just avoid them?
That is a great question. I mean, we certainly, we don't design speed humps. We design speed humps so that for whatever vehicle you're traveling in, whether it's a car, a bicycle, a scooter, that it is comfortable to go over at no more than 20 miles an hour. If somebody is doing it for the thrills, I think that's a challenge I'm not sure I have a clear answer to, but it's something that I'll definitely take back to the team for us to try to look at.
Obviously, this is a plan to slow down cars among the cities, but especially downtown. Is there a little bit more enforcement for bikes to follow the lights and scooters to follow the lights? They try and get through cars when they see a gap. Some of the accidents happen that way.
Yeah, some do, and I think everyone, no matter what type of vehicle they're traveling in, needs to follow the law and obey traffic signs, signals. Our focus tends to start with cars because that is where deaths and injuries are most likely to happen. When we look at the statistics of how people are injured in our streets, it is the vast majority are crashes involving cars. But we certainly want to build infrastructure that's designed to encourage safe behavior by everyone. There's a lot of research now that's shown that when you build protected bike infrastructure, when you place bike signals to guide cyclists about what they should do in a given location, that you start to see more compliance with traffic regulations. You start to see a cultural norm develop amongst people who ride bikes that it's appropriate to stop and wait. The same is even true for people on foot. When you see signals that are timed in such a way where the person walking is, asked to wait 2 or 3 minutes to cross the street in a downtown neighborhood, that's when you start seeing people just say, you know what, I'm not going to wait, I'm just going to cross against the light. So we try to make streets designed so that everyone feels included in the design of the street. It's clear where people should be and how they should act. And we believe that by doing that, we'll get safer streets for all modes of transportation.
Just to play kind of devil's advocate, I mean, obviously safety is paramount when it comes to those things, but how do you balance traffic? Because obviously traffic is an issue in this city and it's oftentimes ranked some of the worst in the country. So how do you balance safety with still getting people to where they need to go in a timely fashion?
All of this is pretty technical, right? There's lots of factors with street design and the specific makeup of each intersection and each corridor. But what I want everyone to hear today is that we're really announcing that we're taking a new approach. Instead of only having a very small number that residents and different neighborhoods have to fight for by getting letters of recommendation and getting everyone to call who they know inside City Hall, we're really focusing on where this is needed. And of course, it's going to be customized to that specific location, but there's going to be a lot more baked in safety infrastructure across the entire city. There were concerns previously about whether snow plowing would be affected if there were speed humps. We have figured out how to do that. That is not the conflict that should be preventing us from making streets safer. There were questions about how we could really go deep and customize each of these areas, but that meant that only 2 very small neighborhoods were getting moved on per year in some cases, and the waiting list of neighborhoods was dozens and dozens long. And so what you're hearing today is that we are going to take an approach where we're going wide, we're going fast, and we want to get ahead of the dangerous incidents that hopefully we can prevent instead of chasing after them once it's too late and trying to prevent the next horrible thing. Traffic is one of Boston's biggest concerns. We're building housing, we're investing in our schools, we're adding new jobs. People have to be able to get around to where they need to go. As our city grows, it won't work if the only way you can get around is driving a car. So we're doing everything, as you heard, to make other options possible for people who do want to ride a bike or people who do want to have jobs closer in their neighborhood so that they can walk and access everything they need as a pedestrian. we also need to continue the pressure on the MBTA. That is the number one stressor when it comes to getting around and affecting traffic. And so we're monitoring that very closely, working with the T and the state there. But it can't be an either or conversation about whether people can reliably get to work or whether they can be protected and safe as they're walking around their communities. We need to do both. We know we can. And traffic, it really, where the cars are driving makes a big difference. It should not be that residential side streets kind of without anyone agreeing to it, but because the navigation apps push traffic that way, that those all of a sudden become the new American Legion or the new high-speed way to save a minute or two. Our residential streets are for neighbors and people first and foremost, and we will find ways to make transportation accessible in every other way across the city. Adam.
What about, you mentioned working with the MBTA, what about working with DCR and stuff? Because you've got a ton of Gallivan Boulevard, DFW Parkway, but you guys have no control over.
Yeah, well, one, we're really excited about how this new administration is shaping up at the state level. There's been great communication and even a lot of I'm trying to see it as opportunities for those who have moved on from the city into the state administration in particular, but there's a lot of crossover of people who know Boston very well, who are now in roles like the Secretary of Transportation, like many of her key staffers at all levels. And there's even new departments that are being created within that to innovate that are very tied to the work that the city has done. And we're proud to share those relationships and be in conversation. We know that as we build this out, it's going to require communication at all levels, even since Yasha has become our chief of streets. Again, I keep returning to snow as a very tangible example of something we have to do every year. It can be very stressful if it's not done right, and ways that we're not just keeping it going and trying to manage it how it's always been managed, but innovating and doing things differently. Even on snow, for example, the city and city and DCR really not only looked at places where it would actually be their jurisdiction to take care of snow removal, but to have a list of those intersections ahead of time, to monitor each time and to know where the gaps and the difference in jurisdictions actually led to slower snow removal or slower outcomes for residents, so that we could be on top of it for this last year, which thankfully didn't materialize as much snow. But that's the type of partnership that we're working on. There's dedicated staff that is partnering directly with the state in many cases. And so organizationally, we're building in that muscle so that we are one and the same. And I think, anyway, what do you want to add on this, Yasha? Good. Go ahead.
The only thing I'd add is that under some of the new traffic safety rules that were passed by the state legislature at the end of the last session, there is additional opportunity for the city to petition with state agencies that control roadways to lower speed limits. And so we're looking at those locations where there might be some safety benefit to dropping the speed limit on a state-owned road to 25 miles an hour to match the city speed limit.
Like, could the state find out that there's an X amount of traffic accidents because you guys are collecting that data and you share that with them? And also, would you collect like constituent complaints and then forward them on to the state?
Yeah, there's a lot of that kind of cross-collaboration. The state has its own statewide crash tracking system that looks at deaths and injuries on roadways, both state-controlled and local, and we certainly have access to that data, and they have access to our crash information, so that's definitely part of the collaboration that the mayor spoke of.
And Brendan works statewide. So
yeah, so MassDOT has a tool called their Impact Crash Portal, where they collect police reports from crashes. I would definitely encourage you to check that out. They have different hotspot areas in the city of Boston, intersection locations looking at multiple years of crash data. And they also look at it based on injury severity. So instead of just there's a bunch of fender benders at this location, this is actually an area where people are getting injured, and like they rank them and they encourage people to improve those intersections. Yes.
Fatalities like among the state. Did Boston data mirror that last year?
Boston had the most fatal crashes, but it's also the biggest city. So Boston had 12 on all roadways, not just city-owned, but Worcester had 8, and Chicopee had 5, and Chicopee has 55,000 people. So once again, it's roadways that are fast-moving vehicles, and where there are not safety additions like the speed humps that are being added here.
Okay, I have a question for all of you guys. I'm the speed demon.
Okay, you might be great.
No. You slowed me down, all of you guys. Thank you. But I'm having issue with parking. Where you guys have put up, like American Legion, I'm a grandmother. There's a park right beside, in Franklin Park, where I like to park beside the park and go in. And I think that when you guys did it, I don't think you gave any thought to a person who lives in like Mattapan coming to bring their child to their favorite park that's in Franklin Park. I understand I can go inside of Franklin Park and walk that quarter mile to get to that playground, but sometimes I'm lazy.
All right. So I'm happy you admit to being a speed demon. I'm glad you slowed it down. But here's
You notice the keys are in my hand. And I'm walking.
so here's the challenge with that park. The challenge with that park is the noise. And so as you can remember or know, it's a park like this one. It's for toddlers. It's for children. And that is not who you find there on Friday, Saturday night, right? You find the folks with all of the machines that they open up and make all the noise. And so we did leave some parking there, but the problem has just been we're trying to balance Franklin Hill and the noise that comes out of that little park and making sure you can take your granddaughter, grandson over. So I can tell you we thought about it a lot, but there are, I think there are 5, 6 parking spots still there. Are there not? Yeah,
There's one that's narrowed down a little further, but the reason why I won't park there is because I believe it's park and recreation parking. And I'm not getting told in Boston
Okay.
City.
Well, let's see if we can figure it out. But that's primarily what that was about. It's about the fact that even today, all of them, even today with all of those flex posts, there's still 200 people there sometimes. And so that is the problem. That's more what we're trying to address there. And of course, on American Legion, it was truly a raceway where people flipped their cars over and, yep. Okay. Yes. And Cummings Highway is still the same. I can tell you, Fatima and I were trading pictures here recently about just how another accident, cars flipping over. And so I'm just asking folks to continue to say, slow down. Please do. That is really, people say, why are we doing this? And I only can answer because I'm trying to stop you from killing yourself, because that's exactly what we want to do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, thanks, everyone.